Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and navigating these relationships. And a big question we get, and something we probably should talk about more, is vindictiveness. And more specifically, how do you protect yourself from a narcissistic person's vindictiveness? Let's start at the top. You've really got to be aware this is a thing. Vindictiveness is such a core element of narcissistic relationships. I'm not talking about schadenfreude. I'm not talking about passive aggression. I'm talking about active. They're going to get in there and mess up with your stuff. Vindictiveness. Now, vindictiveness, like everything narcissism related, is on a continuum. At the maybe lower levels of vindictiveness, they may pass a little unpleasant gossip about you. They may sort of have some uncomfortable social media posts about things related to you. They may tell someone something that leads you to not having an opportunity, right? But as we go up the continuum all the way to extreme vindictiveness, it can actually be terrifying. They may dox you. They may get you into legal trouble. They may sue you. They may make it so you lose your job. They may put you in physical harm. Obviously, that's a continuum, and someone passing a rumor about you is very different than the other. But no matter what, I don't think I've ever seen a case of a narcissistic relationship where there wasn't some vindictiveness, when someone stood up to them and, more importantly, sort of pulled the plug on the relationship. So the first step is sometimes understanding the why helps, but we don't want to spend too much time on the why. Number one, that it's going to happen. Number two, what's the why? Narcissistic people have to be in power. They have to dominate. And above all else, they have to win. So if you do something like try to break up with them, try to pull them off a project, whatever it is, fire them, anything, not invite them to a family event, that's an ego injury. And usually the ego injury is the catalyst for the vindictiveness. Because in essence, when their ego is injured, they've lost power. It brings up shame. They're going to get that power back. And there's no more surefire way for them to get power back by seeking out vengeance, by being vindictive. And like I said, it can range from petty to terrifying, but it's always a way for them to feel the ship has sort of righted itself. So the bigger questions, we know they're going to be vindictive. You can set a clock by it. Vindictiveness, for example, is a big part of post-separation abuse. So it's in essence, the post-separation abuse is you're going to pay. You're going to pay for trying to take my money in a divorce. You're going to pay for trying to split up with me. You're going to pay for making me look bad. Whatever their psychology is around, for example, a breakup, you're going to pay. That's why we see post-separation abuse. So now to the protection. Number one, you got to know, like I said, what it is. You got to know it's coming. If the more something unexpected happens to us, the less prepared we are for it. Now, it's hard to prepare for vindictiveness, but sometimes it may mean getting legal stuff in order, having all the documentation you need. Sometimes it even means preparing people. You may literally say to friends, hey, I'm about to break up with such and such. I'm giving it about a week and they're going to call you and say terrible things about me. I need you to be prepared for that. You may tell an employer that this is what's happening and such is going to happen. If you're concerned there's a dangerousness issue, you might involve security in it. And I have to say that in the most severe and awful kinds of narcissistic vindictiveness stories where people were physically harmed or even killed, those hoofbeats were sounding. You could tell that kind of vindictiveness was souping up. And I think a lot of people say there's no way they would go there. If someone's narcissistic, please always know there's a possibility that there is a way that someone could go there, and always be prepared. So that means safety plans. Like, for example, if you do break up with someone where it has been tense at times of these perceived abandonments, when you're like, I can't do this anymore, make sure there's someone there with you. But it is about preparing for it, is knowing it. Knowing it's likely going to happen, and then taking whatever actions you need to take. Some people be like, oh, you're exaggerating. It's not going to be that bad. Okay, if these people want to gaslight you, A, file that away for later discernment, but B, better that you're prepared. And maybe the narcissistic person never does reach out to your friends. Maybe they do disappear off into the sunset. I ain't taking that bet. But then people are saying, ooh, she said this was coming, and here we are. That as long as you're aware, because I have to tell you that Some of the worst narcissistic vindictiveness I ever experienced was early, when I was actually just at the early stages of doing this work, and even before I was doing this work. And I think I was so caught unawares that I was really destabilized, and I was having these huge whole body reactions of panic. Had I been a little prepared, and when I look at the character of the person involved, I absolutely should have been prepared that this was going to happen, I would have done things very, very differently in my life. Number 3, you don't, as expensive as it may be, sometimes you just got to call a lawyer. And I know it sucks, especially if you don't have lots of money. If you really have no money, it might involve working with a local legal aid organization. It might mean working with a local domestic violence organization. If you do have money, find someone you trust and involve them. Many times what lawyers will tell you is that, sadly, when it comes to narcissism, because the stuff they're doing often doesn't go over that line, whether it's like online abuse, online harassment, coming after you, passing these kinds of rumors, you'd be surprised how much has to happen. But if you talk to someone legally, you might be able to figure out what are the things you can and can't do that can keep you sort of protected if it has more of that sort of legal feel to it. Number 4, the thing to keep in mind is a lot of the vindictiveness can take the form of a smear campaign. Smear campaigns are a very, very common way. And the smear campaign is sort of like 2 types of pain for the price of 1. Number 1, not only do you have this experience of vindictiveness sort of coming at you, but number 2 is that they're now involving people you once thought were your friends, your allies, and your supporters, and they're coming at you too, sort of doing the bidding and gaslighting for the narcissistic person. So you're experiencing grief about that part of it and fear about the first part. Again, smear campaigns are very real, and they're a very big part of the narcissistic person's vindictiveness toolbox. We tend to see it happen more. Sometimes grandiose narcissists tend to have bigger social networks, so they can often pull it off a little bit better. But I think again, being prepared for that. At the end of the day, when a smear campaign is done, you learn something very uncomfortable to learn, but you do learn who your people are. Because the people who didn't succumb to the smear campaign, the people who did stand by you, the people who did support you, those are your people. And the people who did succumb to that smear campaign, you might want to put them on the back burner, be much more discerning, and probably disengage. And if they play naive, like, I didn't know, you just need smarter friends. You don't need to hang out with them anyhow. So you learn something in a smear campaign, but while it's happening, it can be utter devastation. Not only the fear, like I said, of the vindictiveness, but the grief around what other people are doing. But I think, and then finally, what you really want to be aware of is that a lot of times people around you are going to minimize this concept of vindictiveness. Oh, it's not going to be that bad. Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, they're just hurt. But meanwhile, you might be having very strong somatic and physiological reactions. You might be ruminating about it. You might be wondering, maybe I should have just gone along and not have to live through this. So you're going through something very, very real psychologically. And if you have a history of long-term narcissistic abuse in this and in other relationships, or a history of trauma, just that sort of somatic exhaustion that you will be experiencing when this is coming at you. Now, vindictiveness in its most severe form is obviously going to happen in the most severe narcissistic relationships with more malignant narcissists, people more severe on that continuum, longer term relationships where breaking the relationship has more consequences, has more of a public effect. Obviously, those are the cases where you might see more extreme vindictiveness. But I got to tell you, one of the worst cases of narcissistic vindictiveness I experienced was with someone I actually didn't know very well. So it may not always be that in this case. So the person was almost psychopathic. Like it was that severe. So understanding that multiple things can be playing in, but more than anything, I want this video to ungaslight any of you that have ever experienced narcissistic vindictiveness, because this is on top of all the fear, the anxiety, and the discomfort that the vindictiveness brings out in you. The other thing that happens is that when everyone around you is minimizing it or actually painting you out as paranoid and crazy, it can take this experience and make you even more destabilized. Narcissistic vindictiveness is very real. It can make decision-making really hard. And even when you feel in every bone in your body, I got to get out of this, it's enough to make you scared, which is why you often need support, therapy, sometimes attorneys, sometimes advocates, to help you with your decision-making process and to ensure that you're safe, or at least supported as you go through the transition or decision making in any narcissistic relationship. Thanks again.